I was 23 when I signed that contract, desperate to save my dying mother. For 3 years, I was Damian Stryker's perfect secret, his bought woman who had to smile and stay quiet while he treated me like expensive furniture. He never saw me as human, just a pretty thing he owned. When I got pregnant, I heard him tell his lawyer about getting rid of his loose ends when contracts ended. I knew he would either force me to lose my baby or steal my child from me. So I ran and disappeared, raising my son Leo alone for 7 years. I thought I was safe until my little boy brought home a nice man from the park. My blood turned to ice when Damian Stryker walked into my small apartment, not even recognizing the woman whose life he had destroyed. I was 23 when I walked into that glass tower, my hands shaking as I clutched the folder containing my mother's medical bills. The receptionist's perfectly manicured nails clicked against her keyboard as she announced my arrival to the top floor. I had never been in a building this expensive before, where even the air seemed to cost more than my monthly rent. The elevator. Ride to the penthouse felt like ascending to another world. When the doors opened, I stepped into an office that was larger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city that made me feel dizzy. Behind an enormous desk sat Damian Stryker, 35 years old and everything the newspapers said he was. Cold gray eyes, sharp suit that probably cost more than my car, and an expression that made it clear he viewed people as either useful or disposable. He did not look up from his papers when I entered. "Sit," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been told no. I lowered myself into the leather chair across from him, feeling like a child called to the principal's office. The silence stretched until I wondered if he had forgotten I was there. When he finally raised his eyes to meet mine, I felt exposed, under his calculating stare. He was evaluating me like a piece of property he might purchase. "Your financial situation is quite desperate," he said, flipping through what I realized was a detailed report about my life. My stomach dropped as I saw bank statements, credit reports, even photographs of the tiny apartment I shared with my dying mother. "The medical bills alone will bankrupt you within 6 months," he continued in the same tone he might use to discuss the weather. "Your mother's cancer treatment is experimental and expensive. Insurance will not cover it. You have exhausted all traditional loan options." Each word felt like a slap, laying out my hopelessness with clinical precision. I managed to find my voice. "I can work harder. I can get a second job, maybe a third." His laugh was sharp and humorless. "At minimum wage? You would need to work every hour of every day for the next 5 years just to break even. Your mother will be dead long before then." The casual cruelty of his words made me flinch, but he seemed to take satisfaction in my reaction. He slid a thick document across the desk toward me. "I have a proposition that will solve your problems immediately." The contract was bound in expensive leather, every page filled with dense legal language that made my head spin. 3 years of your time in exchange for complete financial security. Your mother's treatment will be covered in full, plus a generous monthly allowance for both of you. As I tried to process the terms, he explained the arrangement with the same detachment he might use for any business deal. I would be his exclusive companion for social events, available whenever he required my presence. Discretion was paramount. No emotional attachments, no personal relationships with other men. Complete obedience to his instructions. "You will live in an apartment I provide," he said, watching my face carefully for any reaction. "Your wardrobe, your appearance, your schedule, all will be managed according to my preferences. You will attend events with me as needed, maintain the image I require, and ask no questions about my business or personal life." The monthly payment he mentioned was more money than I had ever seen at once. It would not only cover my mother's treatment, but ensure she lived her remaining time in comfort instead of the cramped, cold apartment where she was slowly dying. I thought of her lying in that narrow bed, trying to hide her pain from me, insisting she was fine when we both knew she was not. "Why me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You are attractive but not too beautiful, educated but not threatening, desperate but not broken. You understand your place." His words cut through me like glass. In his eyes, I was nothing more than an acquisition, carefully selected for specific qualities that would serve his purposes. He placed an expensive pen beside the contract. The offer expires when you leave this office. Your mother has perhaps 2 months without treatment. With it, she could have 2 years, maybe more. The ultimatum hung in the air between us like a blade. I thought of my mother teaching me to read, working 3 jobs to put me through college, never complaining, even when she was so tired she could barely stand. She had sacrificed everything for me. Now it was my turn to sacrifice for her. With trembling fingers, I picked up the pen. "There is one more thing," he said as I hesitated over the signature line. "You will sign a non-disclosure agreement. You will never speak of this arrangement to anyone, during or after the contract period. Violation results in immediate termination, and full financial responsibility for all money provided." The trap was perfect and complete. I would become his secret, his possession, with no way to ask for help or even speak about what was happening to me. But my mother would live. That was all that mattered. I signed my name in careful letters, sealing my fate for the next 3 years. As I handed the contract back to him, Damien's expression never changed. He was already moving on to other business, other deals, other people whose desperation he could exploit. I had just sold myself to save the person I loved most, and to him it was just another Tuesday morning transaction. The first year passed in a blur of expensive restaurants and charity galas, where I smiled and stayed silent beside Damien. He introduced me as his companion to people who understood exactly what that meant, their knowing looks making my skin crawl. I learned to walk in heels that cost more than my old monthly salary, to eat foods I could not pronounce, and to laugh at jokes that were not funny. My mother's treatments were working, and watching her grow stronger made every humiliation worthwhile. By the second year, something dangerous began growing in my chest. Hope. Damien had started asking my opinion on small things, like which tie looked better, or whether he should invest in a particular company. When we attended events, he would place his hand on the small of my back in a way that felt almost protective. There were moments when I caught him looking at me with something that resembled warmth instead of cold calculation. I began to believe that maybe I meant something to him beyond the contract. Maybe after 3 years, he would ask me to stay not as his bot companion, but as someone he actually cared about. I started imagining a future where my mother could meet the man who had saved her life, where I could introduce him as more than just my employer. The fantasy grew stronger with each passing month. The 3rd year shattered every foolish dream I had built. Damien became distant again, checking his watch during our conversations and taking phone calls that he would not finish in front of me. I overheard him talking to his assistant about scheduling meetings with potential candidates and felt my stomach drop. When I gathered the courage to ask what he meant, he looked at me with the same cold indifference he had shown during our first meeting. "The contract expires in 6 weeks, he said, as if I might have forgotten the most important date in my life. "I am interviewing replacements. You have fulfilled your obligations adequately." Adequately. 3 years of my life, and I had been adequate. I discovered I was pregnant on a Tuesday morning, staring at the test with shaking hands in the marble bathroom of the apartment he provided. The timing was cruel beyond measure. 6 weeks left on my contract, and now I carried his child. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope again. Surely this would change everything. Surely he would want his own child, would see this as a sign that we were meant to be more than a business arrangement. That hope died the next evening when I overheard him talking to his lawyer in his home office. I had come to discuss dinner, plans, when I heard my name through the slightly open door. I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding as I listened to him speak about me like I was a problem to be solved. "The contract expires in 5 weeks, Damien was saying, his voice carrying the same tone he used for any business matter. "I need to ensure there are no loose ends when this arrangement concludes. Women in her position sometimes develop unrealistic expectations or make unreasonable demands." His lawyer's voice was equally cold. "The non-disclosure agreement should prevent any public issues. As for personal complications, those can usually be managed with appropriate financial incentives or legal pressure." "Good," Damien replied. "I want this transition to be clean. No drama, no lingering attachments. She has served her purpose, and now I need to move forward with fresh arrangements." The words hit me like physical blows. Loose ends, personal complications. I was carrying his child, and he was already planning how to dispose of me like unwanted paperwork. I pressed my hand to my still flat stomach, knowing with absolute certainty that he would either force me to end the pregnancy or find a way to take the baby from me entirely. That night, I began planning my escape with the same careful attention to detail that had once impressed him in our business discussions. I opened a new bank account in a different city using my maiden name and an address I rented through a mail forwarding service. I researched places where someone could disappear without leaving digital footprints, small towns where cash was still accepted and questions were not asked. Over the next 2 weeks, I slowly moved my few personal belongings out of the apartment. Nothing expensive that he had bought me, nothing that could be traced. Just photographs of my mother, a few books, and the simple jewelry that had belonged to my grandmother. I told him I was donating clothes to charity when he noticed boxes leaving, and he barely looked up from his phone to acknowledge my explanation. The hardest part was saying goodbye to my mother without telling her the truth. I sat beside her hospital bed, holding her hand as she slept peacefully for the first time in years. The treatments had given her the gift of time, and I had to trust that Damien would not cut off her care out of spite when he discovered I was gone. The contract stated that her medical expenses would be covered for the full 3 years regardless of my performance, and I clung to that legal language like a lifeline. On my last night, I wrote a simple resignation letter and left it on his desk along with the key to the apartment and all the expensive jewelry he had given me. I kept only my grandmother's wedding ring, a simple gold band that reminded me of who I had been before I became his possession. I walked out of that building at 3 a.m, carrying nothing but a small suitcase and the secret growing inside me. 7 years later, I had built a new life as a freelance graphic designer in a quiet city 3 states away. My son, Leo, was everything bright and beautiful in my world, with his father's gray eyes but a warmth that Damien had never possessed. I thought I was safe until Leo came running into our small apartment, his face glowing with excitement about the nice man who had helped him at the park. The world stopped spinning when Damien Stryker walked through my apartment door. 7 years had changed him slightly, threads of silver at his temples and new lines around those cold gray eyes, but he was unmistakably the man who had owned me for 3 years. Leo bounced beside him, chattering excitedly about his new friend who had helped retrieve his soccer ball from a tree. My hands went numb as I gripped the kitchen counter, every instinct screaming at me to run. But there was nowhere to go, and Leo was looking at me with such pure joy that I could not destroy his happiness with my panic. Damien's gaze swept over me with polite disinterest, the way someone might glance at furniture. He did not recognize me. 7 years of freedom, of building myself into someone stronger, had changed my appearance more than I realized. My hair was shorter and darker now, my body different after pregnancy and motherhood. The expensive clothes and perfect makeup were gone, replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. I was no longer the desperate young woman he had purchased. "You must be Leo's mother," Damien said, extending his hand with practiced politeness. "I am Damien Stryker. Your son is quite remarkable." The sound of his voice saying Leo's name made my blood freeze. I stared at his outstretched hand, remembering how those same fingers had once signed the contract that controlled every aspect of my life. When I did not immediately respond, Leo tugged on my sleeve with concern. "Mom, this is my friend I told you about," Leo said, his young voice cutting through my paralysis. "He helped me get my ball, and he asked about my family. I told him all. About you." My throat felt like sandpaper as I forced words out. "What exactly did you tell him, sweetheart?" I managed to ask, never taking my eyes off Damien's face. "I told him you take care of me all by yourself, and that you are the best mom ever," Leo replied with the innocent honesty that made my heart race. "And I told him we do not have a dad, but that is okay because you are enough for both." Something flickered across Damien's expression, but I could not tell if it was interest or pity. He was studying Leo with the same analytical attention he had once given to business deals, and I realized with growing horror that he was seeing similarities. Leo had inherited his father's gray eyes and the same stubborn set to his jaw. "I was wondering," Damien said, his tone carefully casual, "who watches Leo when you are working? A boy his age needs proper supervision." The question felt like a trap, but I could not figure out the right answer. I work from home mostly, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Freelance graphic design. Leo is very independent. That must be difficult managing everything alone, he continued, and I caught something calculating in his expression. Do you have help? A nanny, perhaps? Before I could answer, Leo piped up with devastating honesty. We do not have money for a nanny. Mom says we have enough for what we need, but sometimes she works really late and forgets to eat dinner. I wanted to disappear into the floor. In a few innocent sentences, Leo had painted a picture of our modest struggles, making us sound like a charity case. Damien's businessman instincts were clearly engaged now, sensing opportunity in our situation. Actually, I said quickly, desperate to end this conversation, we should let Mr. Stryker get back to his day. Thank you for helping Leo with his ball. But Damien made no move to leave. Instead, he crouched down to Leo's eye level, something I had never seen him do with children before. Leo, what do you do for fun? Besides soccer, I mean. I like to draw, Leo said eagerly. Mom teaches me about colors and shapes for her work. And I like to read stories about dragons and knights. Do you like dragons, Mr. Stryker? I think dragons are fascinating creatures, Damien replied, with what seemed like genuine interest. Very powerful and intelligent. They protect what is important to them. The word sent a chill down my spine. Was he talking about dragons or something else entirely? I felt like I was watching a predator circle its prey, but I could not tell if the target was Leo or me. Mom, can Mr. Stryker stay for dinner? Leo asked with the fearless enthusiasm of childhood. We are having spaghetti. It is not fancy, but Mom makes it really good. Oh no, I said quickly, probably too loudly. I am sure Mr. Stryker has important places to be. He is a very busy man. Actually, Damien said, standing slowly while keeping his eyes fixed on mine, I have some time this evening, but I would not want to impose on your hospitality. The way he said the word hospitality made my skin crawl. It reminded me of how he used to speak in coded language during business dinners, saying one thing while meaning something completely different. I felt trapped between my son's innocent invitation and my growing certainty that this man represented danger I could not yet understand. Please, Mom, Leo begged, clasping his hands together in the gesture that usually melted my resolve. He seems really nice and he knows about dragons. I looked at my son's hopeful face and then at Damien's carefully neutral expression. Every fiber of my being screamed warnings, but I could not explain my terror without revealing secrets that would destroy the safe world I had built for Leo. In that moment, I made a choice that would change everything. Of course, I heard myself saying. Mr. Stryker is welcome to join us for dinner. Dinner became a surreal nightmare where I had to pretend normalcy, while my past sat at my kitchen table eating spaghetti with my son. Damien asked careful questions about our life, each one feeling like a probe into weaknesses he could exploit. When Leo mentioned that we had moved here when he was a baby, Damien's eyes sharpened with interest. Where did you live before? He asked me directly, twirling pasta with the same precision he had once used to dissect business contracts. Back. East, I said vaguely, focusing on cutting Leo's food to avoid meeting his gaze. It was time for a fresh start. A fresh start can be liberating, Damien replied, and something in his tone made me look up. Sometimes people need to escape their past completely to build something new. The words hung in the air like a threat. He was fishing for information, trying to piece together a puzzle he did not yet realize he was solving. Leo chattered happily about school and his friends, oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults at the table. After dinner, while Leo played in his room, Damien lingered in my small living room. He examined the modest space with the same analytical attention he had once given to multi-million-dollar acquisitions. I watched him catalog every detail, from the secondhand furniture to the children's artwork covering the refrigerator. You seem familiar, he said suddenly, turning those gray eyes on me with uncomfortable intensity. Have we met before? My heart hammered against my ribs. I do not think so. I would remember meeting someone like you. Someone like me? His smile was sharp-edged and predatory. Wealthy, powerful, the kind of person who travels in very different circles than I do. I kept my voice steady despite the panic clawing at my throat. He moved closer, studying my face with the focus of someone trying to solve a puzzle. There is something about your voice, your mannerisms. It is quite remarkable how certain qualities can seem so familiar. Before I could respond, Leo bounded back into the room with a drawing clutched in his small hands. "Mr. Stryker, I made this for you," he announced proudly, holding up a crayon picture of 3 stick figures standing in front of a large house. "Who are these people?" Damien asked, accepting the drawing with what seemed like genuine curiosity. "That is you, and that is me, and that is Mom," Leo explained, pointing to each figure. "We are all standing together like a family. Do you like it?" The innocent words hit like lightning. I saw Damien's face change as he stared at the drawing, then at Leo, then at me. The resemblance between father and son was becoming impossible to ignore, especially when they were standing so close together. Leo had inherited more than just Damien's eyes. He had the same strong jawline and the way he tilted his head when thinking. "Leo, it is time for your bath," I said quickly, desperate to end this dangerous moment. "But Mom, Mr. Stryker just got my drawing," Leo protested. "I will treasure this," Damien said softly, his voice carrying an odd note that made my blood run cold. "It is quite special to see how a child imagines family." That night, after Leo was finally asleep, I paced my small apartment like a caged animal. Damien had left with promises to visit again soon, and I knew with sickening certainty that my carefully constructed new life was crumbling. He was suspicious now, asking the right questions and getting too close to answers that would destroy everything. I considered running again, packing our few belongings and disappearing into another city, another identity. But Leo had started school here, had friends, had stability for the first time in his young life. Moving again would require explanations. I could not give without revealing the truth about his father. 3 days later, Damien appeared at our door again. This time he brought expensive toys for Leo and flowers for me, playing the role of a generous benefactor with practiced ease. Leo was thrilled by the attention, showing off his new action figures and chattering about how cool his new friend was. "I have been thinking about your situation," Damien said while Leo played nearby. "Raising a child alone must be financially challenging, especially when trying to build a freelance career." "We manage fine," I replied defensively. "I am sure you do. But Leo is a remarkable child who deserves every opportunity. What if I told you I could help provide those opportunities?" The offer felt like a spider's web, beautiful and deadly. "What kind of help?" "I am looking for someone to help with various projects. Someone with your design skills could be quite valuable. The position would pay very well and offer flexible hours that would work around Leo's schedule." I stared at him, recognizing the same calculating expression he had worn 7 years ago when he had offered to solve my problems in exchange for my freedom. "Why would you want to help us? You barely know us." "I find myself quite interested in Leo's welfare," he said, watching my face carefully for any reaction. "He reminds me of someone I once knew, someone important." The words were a warning wrapped in kindness. He knew or suspected something, and this job offer was bait to draw me closer. But refusing would only increase his suspicions, and I could not afford to have Damien Stryker as an enemy when he was already too close to discovering the truth about his son. "What kind of projects?" I heard myself asking, even as every instinct screamed at me to refuse. His smile was triumphant and terrifying, the kind that require absolute discretion and complete trust. "I think you understand the importance of keeping certain things private." Working for Damien again felt like walking back into a nightmare disguised as a dream. The job was exactly as he described: flexible hours and generous pay for design work that seemed almost too easy. But I knew nothing with Damien Stryker was ever simple. He was studying me, testing me, waiting for something. 3 weeks into the arrangement, he made an offer that stopped my breath. "I have been thinking about Leo's living situation," he said during one of our project meetings. "That apartment of yours seems quite cramped for a growing boy. It is fine for us. I replied carefully, though the walls did seem to close in more each day as Leo grew taller and more active. I have a guest house on my estate that sits empty most of the year. Fully furnished, private, with its own garden where Leo could play safely. The rent would be minimal, practically nothing compared to what you pay now. The offer was too good, too convenient, too obviously a trap. But it was also exactly what Leo needed. Our current apartment was tiny, with thin walls and no yard. Leo had to walk 6 blocks to find a decent park, and I constantly worried about his safety in our neighborhood. "Why would you do that for us?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "Leo has grown quite attached to me, Damien," said with calculated warmth. "And I find I enjoy his company. It would be nice to have him nearby." The words sent ice through my veins. He wanted Leo close, wanted to study his son without understanding their connection yet. But refusing would seem suspicious, and the practical benefits were undeniable. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Moving to Damien's estate felt like stepping back into the world I had escaped 7 years ago. The guest house was beautiful, far nicer than anywhere Leo and I had ever lived. But it sat within sight of the main mansion, and I felt Damien's presence like a weight pressing down on us even when he was not visible. Leo loved everything about our new home: the garden, the space to run and play, the pool he was allowed to use whenever he wanted. Most of all, he loved having Mr. Stryker so close by. Damien made time for Leo almost every day, teaching him to swim, playing catch, reading him stories about business and success that seemed far too advanced for a 7-year-old. Watching them together was torture. Leo craved male attention, having never had a father figure in his life, and Damien seemed genuinely interested in everything Leo said and did. But I knew this kindness was calculated, part of some larger plan I could not yet see. My fears were confirmed when Damien's housekeeper mentioned that he had been asking questions about Leo's birth date, his medical history, even details about his early development. He was building a file on his own son without realizing it, and every piece of information brought him closer to a truth that would destroy us both. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning when I found Damien and Leo in the garden, Leo chattering excitedly while Damien listened with unusual intensity. As I approached, I caught the tail end of their conversation. "So your mom never talks about your dad?" Damien was asking with forced casualness. "She says he went away before I was born," Leo replied with the matter-of-fact acceptance of children. "But sometimes she gets really sad when I ask questions, so I stopped asking." "That must be hard for you, not knowing anything about him." "Sometimes I pretend you are my dad," Leo said with devastating innocence. "You look like me, and you are really nice, and you know about business stuff like moms say dads should know." I saw Damien freeze, his face going completely still as he stared at Leo with new understanding. The resemblance that had been nagging at him suddenly clicked into focus. Leo's gray eyes, his stubborn chin, the way he held his shoulders when he was thinking hard about something. "Leo, time for lunch," I called out, my voice higher than normal. But Damien was already turning toward me with a look I remembered from 7 years ago. Cold calculation mixed with something darker, more possessive. He had figured it out, or at least suspected strongly enough that he would not let this go. That evening, after Leo was asleep, Damien knocked on the guest house door. I considered not answering, but he would only come back, and running now would confirm everything he suspected. "We need to talk," he said when I opened the door. His voice was perfectly controlled, but I could see the storm building behind his eyes. "About what?" I asked, though we both knew the pretense was over. "About my son," he said quietly, and the words hit me like a physical blow. "About the woman who disappeared 7 years ago carrying my child. About Anya." Hearing my real name from his lips after so long made my knees weak. The careful identity I had built, the safe distance I had maintained, all of it crumbled in that moment. He knew. After 7 years of hiding, of building a new life, of protecting Leo from the truth about his father, Damien Stryker had found us. "I do not know what you are talking about," I whispered, but even I could hear how hollow the denial sounded. "Do not insult my intelligence," he said, stepping closer. Leo is my son. You are Anya. And tomorrow we are going to discuss exactly how this arrangement is going to work going forward. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. He held all the cards now, just like he had 7 years ago, and I was once again completely at his mercy. The confrontation I had dreaded for 7 years came the next morning. Damien arrived at the guest house with legal documents and the same cold expression he had worn when I signed my original contract. Leo was at school, giving us privacy for a conversation that would determine my son's future. "Sit down, Anya," he said, using my real name like a weapon. "We have much to discuss." I remained standing, unwilling to give him even that small advantage. "What do you want?" "I want my son," he said simply. 7 years of his life that you stole from me. 7 years of decisions you made without consulting his father. "You would have destroyed me," I shot back, anger finally overriding my fear. "You talked about disposing of loose ends. I heard you planning to get rid of me like garbage." "That was business," he replied with infuriating calm. "This is family. Leo deserves to know his father, to have the advantages my name and wealth can provide. Leo is happy. He does not need your advantages." Damien's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Living in a tiny apartment, wearing secondhand clothes, attending public school when he could have the best of everything? You call that happiness?" The criticism of our simple life stung, but I refused to let him see how his words affected me. Money is not everything. Love matters more than luxury. "Love?" His eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "Is that what you call hiding a child from his father? Denying him his birthright? Leo could inherit an empire and you would keep him in poverty to satisfy your wounded pride." Before I could respond, he slid the legal documents across the coffee table toward me. "I have had my lawyers prepare a custody agreement. You will sign it, or I will take you to court and destroy you publicly." My hands shook as I picked up the papers. The terms were devastating. Joint custody with Damien having primary residence. Leo would attend elite private schools, spend summers at Damien's various properties, and be groomed to inherit the striker. Business empire. I would become a weekend visitor in my own son's life. "I will never sign this," I said, throwing the papers back at him. "Then you will lose him completely," Damien replied with chilling certainty. "I have unlimited resources, and the best lawyers money can buy. You are a single mother with no family, limited income, and a history of disappearing when things get difficult. Any judge will see that Leo belongs with me." The threat was real and immediate. Damien Stryker could indeed destroy me in court, paint me as an unstable woman who had kidnapped his child and hidden him for 7 years. The legal system favored wealth and stability, both of which he had in abundance while I had neither. "There is another option," he continued, his voice taking on the smooth tone he used when closing business deals. "You could make this easy. For everyone, especially Leo." "What do you mean?" "Marry me." The words hit like a lightning bolt. I stared at him in shock, certain I had misheard. "What?" "Marriage would legitimize Leo, give him my name legally, and provide the stable family structure courts prefer. You would have a comfortable life, and Leo would have both parents." "You are insane," I managed to say. "I would never marry you after what you did to me." "What I did to you was honor a contract that saved your mother's life," he said coldly. "You got exactly what you agreed to, and your mother lived 2 full years because of my money." The casual mention of my mother's death was like a slap. She had passed away peacefully 3 years ago, never knowing the truth about Leo's father or how I had earned the money for her treatment. Her final years had been comfortable because of Damien's wealth, but also because of my sacrifice. "Leo needs stability," Damien continued. "Children from broken homes face significant disadvantages. This arrangement would benefit everyone involved." "Everyone except me," I said bitterly. "You would be the wife of one of the wealthiest men in the country. Most women would consider that a privilege." His arrogance was breathtaking. He truly believed that his money could solve everything, could buy my compliance just as it had 7 years ago. But this time, I was not the desperate young woman who had signed away her freedom. I was Leo's mother, and I would protect my son with everything I had. I need time to think, I said finally. You have 24 hours, he replied, standing to leave. After that, my lawyers file for emergency custody based on parental kidnapping charges. That evening, I held Leo closer than usual as I read him his bedtime story. He chattered about his day at school, about the new friend he had made, about how much he enjoyed living on Mr. Stryker's estate. His innocence broke my heart. He had no idea that his entire world was about to change, that the man he had grown to care about was his father, and planned to take him away from me. Mom, are you sad? Leo asked, noticing the tears I was trying to hide. Just tired, sweetheart, I lied, kissing his forehead. Get some sleep. As I tucked him in, Leo grabbed my hand with his small fingers. I love you, Mom. You are the best mom in the whole world. His words gave me strength. Whatever Damien threatened, whatever legal battles lay ahead, I would not let him destroy the bond between Leo and me. My son deserved better than a father who saw him as a possession to be acquired, rather than a child to be loved. I spent the night making plans, researching lawyers I could not afford, considering options that seemed impossible. By morning, I had made my decision. I would fight Damien Stryker with everything I had, even if it meant losing everything in the process.